Diary of a Man in Despair. Friedrich Reck. September 22, 1939.
Dear Reck, I am writing from home, back from the Polish War and before I leave for the Western Front of this Second World War. I am now a captain in the Air Force, and am just back from the Battle of Poland and 11 flying missions, some of them rather unusual missions like dive-bombing columns of troops and troop trains. Once, out of sheer love of the craft, I wangled an invitation as a guest on a bombing run over Warsaw, one of many such, of course, but this was a vertical dive from 16,000 feet down to 2,200. And I came out of it untouched, even if there are a few scratches on the crate. And now for England. But more of that later. You heard right, I'm not lying, we are about to dare the impossible. We are the children of the gods, and they are most merciful. But we have our own way of tempting fate, we put our hands around its throat and say, bless me, or I won't let go. Dear Reck, I have not written to you for many years now. But we have time enough and to spare, we humans, we do not need to hurry. I have wanted to come clear about my preference for East Prussia and whether it was somehow too hasty. Now, I have flown over it all, from its northern extremity completely across the whole of it, to attack the enemy, and each time with a bomb load of 1,600 kilos. And each time I have come back a couple of hours later from the Polish waste safe and sound to the glory of Masuria. Sometimes, there were dead on board, planes were missing, or a crate was so shot up it could only be landed in a heap of twisted metal. Because, when you have caught a Polish infantry transport battalion on the southern edge of a swamp, and left it a quarter hour later a burial ground, you do not ask yourself what price you paid, and you feel that your own death would be incommensurate. I do not know, Reck, how well you know the Polacks, or how enduring you consider that the order we have created here will be. But this much I do know, this order will remain, even if Europe, and England too, has to be turned into ruins and ashes. I was a member of the Hitler Youth, I was granted a post of some authority despite the fact that I was not a war veteran, and I am, naturally, a bone-deep believer in National Socialism. Yes, Reck, I know about the terrible mistakes that were made. There are places where the dry rot reaches right down into the ground. But I know also that these mistakes are not fatal, rather, that fate accompanies the spirit, precisely in the sense expressed by my great friend, Reck-Malleczewen, and that I can confidently believe in the spirit of my Third Reich. We too, you and I, move in directions that are completely opposed, of course. Austria, the Sudetenland, Bohemia, Memel were Christmas presents for me. Then, in midsummer, and even now, in the middle of the war, the mere thought that Vienna is no longer apart from the German Reich gives me a feeling of physical well-being. And the war against Poland was my war, long awaited, long desired, and fought with passion. I was glad to take part in it. 11 times I took leave of this East Prussian glory and flew over fields dotted with 10,000 girls waving goodbye, and 11 times I came back, deeply happy, larger than life. Now the war must be carried against England, so that East Prussia can be released from its isolation and its cage of boundary lines, once and for all. A difficult task. I believe that England is either an article of faith, or a superstition. It may prove to be a tough piece of leather to work. But to win in 1918 at incredible cost, and then in 1933, or certainly by 1935, to allow one's adversary to become powerful once again, surely, this is political dilettantism of the most ridiculous kind. And then, only then, war with Germany? No, Reck, that is simply nonsense, gross stupidity, parliamentary umbrella politics which lets every favorable chance go by, and then challenges the adversary when you feel personally insulted. I haven't the slightest idea what is going to happen from now on. Mind at rest, I merely sit in my bombing crate and shoot down anybody who gets in the way. But I am beginning to get the idea that the issue that has to be fought out here is simply the total existence of either England or Germany. Reck, I don't care how many warnings there are about darkening skies and England. We are not unaccustomed to fighting in the dark. Remember that we have gained priceless experience in Poland on how to deal with peoples and nations which insist on being our enemies. The Poles certainly fought with remarkable courage. Still, we quite pitilessly shot them to pieces. I believe that we did not even hate the Poles, certainly we don't now, completely demoralized mass of primitives that they are today. Still, when there is a question of German farmers being shot in the back, we are going to deal with the matter in a completely new spirit of Germanic coldness, no matter if we have to put any number of Polish intellectuals against the wall. And what is certain here is that the most important of these are already gone, and that in case of emergency there are always more German farmhands available than there are Polish intellectuals. I don't know if methods like these are adaptable for England. But what I am certain about is that we are slowly coming around to acting in the spirit of, if you will not be my brother, your head will be dropped off your shoulders. I have solemnly concluded that I will strike down any member of any nation who infringes on our newly created new order in the East, or in any way tries to do damage to National Socialism. And I will do this with a pitilessness that should provide food for thought. I am not inclined to wish an attack of soft-heartedness on Germany, until this battle ends in either death or life as a people. Certainly the English, in their arrogant declaration of a war of hunger on women and children, have shown what they think of compassion and humanity. Does this horrify you, Reck? But I have never forced either the Czechs or the Poles to be our implacable enemies, and now that England has chosen this moment to declare war on us, I am merely being logical when I reject shuddering and hand-wringing as a means of waging war. This new world war undoubtedly goes sharply against the grain of many people, but one have no doubt that there are several tens of thousands of my type who will force the rest to perform the way they should. I expect that we will carry on the war against England with the same ice-cold mathematical reasoning quite differently from the hazy, hit-or-miss quality of Wilhelm's war. It is wonderful that despite the exhaustion following the First World War, this nation can now be brought by its leadership into a new and considerably more grim war situation. By comparison, I believe the English people have been more or less enervated by too much city living, that they are hardly capable of heroism, and that, with the exception of the old aristocracy, their culture is worthless. The German, of course, is hardly different, and little remains of the old aristocracy, but he has, instead, a new dream. Anyway, it will be a proper carnage, and if I next find myself turned into a rocket falling from the heavens, I will still, at the last moment, acknowledge this much: we have had our share of the fun. So, I have spoken. All the best. Your XX.
A letter written by a thug, an escaped convict. No, that letter was written by a young man with lively blue eyes and the irresistible laugh of a boy, a good fellow who in civilian life was entirely harmless, young man of good Rhineland middle-class stock, of a certain tradition, of certain pretensions to culture. But this is the result of all these painless victories and this National Socialist piety. The crate may be a little scratched, but a man never hesitates about flying right past God's nose, announcing, "I will not let go, bless me. If you don't, we will come with an entirely new, German coldness, and put a number of angels against the wall." This is the meaning of these victories. This is the tone, this is the pimp's jargon which now croaks out of every loudspeaker and flows from the pens of the newspaper thugs in uniform. And do not dare to contradict, or it's the Gestapo for you. And children denounce their parents, and brothers, if there's a little something in it for them, deliver up their sisters, and all in all, what is right is what is useful for Germany. And the effect to be achieved by this total war is the total flooding of the earth with this new generation of Germans, and if not enough new Germans are produced, why, there is even provision for this eventuality in the efficiency of the German order. A young couple in Munich recently discovered that a defect of vision, with recurrent blindness, seemed to be hereditary in the man's family. The young man had himself sterilized forthwith. But, since as good Germans, they were obligated to have children, the husband unflinchingly sent his wife to the Fount of Youth. The Fount is an SS organization, with offices in the remains of the synagogue on Lenbachplatz. Available at the offices of the Fount is an album of the photos of guaranteed pedigree, Nordic blonde SS men. The client chooses one of these according to taste, and then indicates her choice of stud to the Fount official. Soon thereafter the client finds herself pregnant, and in due course the mother of a little Germanic pan, named Heinz-Dieter or Ike. And this little fellow will grow up to strike down, with a completely new and unusual German coldness, everything which dares to infringe on the new German order or National Socialism. All this is taken care of by the Fount of Youth, 13 Lenbachplatz, Munich. Telephone number so and so. German blood will out, even out of a brothel. This is what we have come to, then, and this is the life of a people winning one victory after another. Frankly, I do not believe there is an ideology behind all this. I believe neither in founts of youth nor little Germanic pans, neither in dragon-killer eyes, nor in cherubic cheeks, neither in the retouched blonde braids of BDM girls demonstratively bouncing off their shoulders. Look. See how healthfully country-style we are, nor in the drums of the Hitler Youth. I believe neither in the new German order, nor in this whole Wotan and Germanic gods business, in the midst of a people which is 60% part Slavic. And the Wotan they are talking about probably came into the world in a Leipzig suburb as the son of a Teutonic-minded fencing instructor, while his Edda will turn out to be a high school teacher from Schkuditz, Saxony. No, based on a perspective gained by many years of watching them, I say that all this comes down to colossal self-deception, behind which lurk all the inclinations of fettered masses, greed and resentment, looseness, and rut, and sexual libertinism, and a complete closing off of the individual, not just from God but from the gods. The mobs in the cities during the decline of the Roman Empire showed the same drive to be considered a young people, the same belligerent uproar, the same challenging of other nations. Then too, whatever demands were made, the rest of the world must accede, because this is how it is with a young nation. In actual fact, what we have here are irremediably sick and futureless mass men, whose ideal is amorphousness, whose ethos is formlessness, and who hate nothing so much as discipline, form, definition. It may very well be that responsibility for all of this is largely to be attributed to the businessmen and industrialists, great and small, of the turn of the century and post-war years, who gave impetus to the process by which this largely uprooted people huddled together to make a mass man-ant heap. It may have seemed to these leaders at that moment that the most satisfactory populace would be a mass of primitives. And the setting up of pseudo-ideologies and symbolic pap, Wotan cults amidst the dynamos, kettledrums amidst the loudspeakers, founts of youth amidst VD clinics, and monkey gland doctors, would be the most comfortable way of distracting attention from the real social and economic problems of the times. In any case, Germany has been sinking deeper and deeper into unreality ever since. It is now completely drugged on its own lies. The cure will be more awful than anything ever seen before in history. One must hate Germany now, truly and bitterly, in order once again, if only for the sake of its glorious past, to be able later to enfold it in all of one's love, like a parent with his misguided and unfortunate child.